You're listening to the Bahá'í World News Service.
Now live at local house of worship.
During a conference at the Bahá'í World Centre, groups of Continental counsellors joined in conversations that were recorded by the Bahá'í World News Service for a series of podcasts on youth and social transformation, on the advancement of women, and on Bahá'í moral and spiritual educational programs. In this episode, we hear from counsellors Maina Mkandawire from Malawi.
We're now developing a new kind of youth who can actually live a coherent life.
Daniel Pierce Olam from Australia.
This idea of when you walk on a path, you're walking with others and you're assisting one another.
Ritia Bakineti from Kiribati.
They know that doing this and it really helps the humanity, but it's also a joyful thing.
Judicaël Mokolé from Central African Republic.
You start to really read the reality and to see how to contribute.
And Javaheri from Zambia.
We see education as fulfilling a certain purpose, building capacity, but building capacity to do what?
Across the world, people from every background are participating in Bahá'í moral and spiritual educational programs. These initiatives aim to awaken the energies latent in the human soul, fostering capacity to contribute to the betterment of society. Among these endeavors are programs for spiritual and moral empowerment, academic education, and initiatives aimed at social and economic development.
I don't know whether you can share more how the Institute process has built that capacity for education.
The content of the Training Institute is so powerful because it helps the individual to see our own transformation,
That's right.
but with reading the reality also. When they are going through the Word of God, because the Word of God is something like it opens the eyes. It opens the
Unveils
ears.
you, yeah, it unlocks the mind. So this idea that we see education as fulfilling a certain purpose, building capacity, but building capacity to do what?
Yes.
And that this idea that every human being has a purpose, and that purpose is to contribute to the transformation of society, but also to the transformation of self. And so, and this arena in which these two things happen is in service.
You know, it has to be taught from while they are really young. For example, in the children class, there are services projects at times for them to take them to the sick people or the old, so they understand. But when they get to the junior youth program, they have a component on service. But the way it is given to them is a capacity building for the junior youth. So they are helped to assisted to see what are the issues around, that how, and within their possibilities and resources, how can they help this concept and help these children to grow, to grow through service. So they know that doing this and it really helps the humanity, but it's also a joyful thing.
I was just reminded of this other program, which is the Preparation for Social Action program.
Yes.
And this program that basically helps people to think about what forms of action they can take within their communities. And we have this program in Zambia as it exists in many countries in Africa. And to see, for example, how people who study the program begin to do little agricultural endeavors together. And of course, agriculture exists. It's something that is common in Zambia, but the attitude with which they are doing it, the fact that this becomes an endeavor for social benefit, as well as for their lives, obviously, but there's an element to it, to the extent where in some cases it might go, a portion of the produce might go to the community school, or they might grow food that is unavailable to the community, which is not necessarily a cash crop, but good for nutrition. They might be thinking of, simple example is you know, if you want to buy seeds, you would buy a huge bag of seed, 90 kilos. And most people wouldn't be able to afford that. But they think about, well, can't we grow seeds for different crops? But they package it in a way that everybody has access.
Yes.
So using scientific methods, but applying them to their community. And so these people, after they finish this 2-year program, they consider themselves to be promoters of community well-being. And they band together and they take action, and you see the influence it has on their communities. It's quite exciting.
So they are doing training institute and also the content of the PSA program.
And in the communities where this is advancing, then these agencies are beginning to sit together and talk about education in its full landscape and say, well, we have the training institute, we have the PSA program, we have community schools and academic education. So how do all of these elements tie together? The social leaders are coming together, and the local spiritual assemblies is getting involved and trying to understand, what does this mean, not only for the Baha'is of the community, but for the community at large. How does this influence the life of that community? So yeah, it's quite exciting to see. Yeah.
Then on the other hand, how we are building capacity at the community level for the community to take ownership of education. Well, in Kiribati, the education is in the hands of the government, but then we have a system where they raise teachers and then they shuffle them around. And so the community doesn't take ownership of it. So they always refer to the teacher, why aren't you doing this? But on the other hand, when the Baha'is, what they are doing, where they are raising tutors, it's the same thing as raising teachers. And in my mind, I never connect the tutor and a teacher, but now it's much clearer. How we see the tutor is the same way we should see also the teacher, but not just about our, the spiritual curriculum, but both social, material, and spiritual, and for the community to take ownership.
Yes.
And especially when the teachers are sent to the remotest places, if you accept to be a teacher, you have to go to those places. But I can give an example of Angola, for example. The teacher is, say, maybe 100 kilometers from the headquarters.
Yes.
To get his salary, every month he has to go 100 kilometers to get his money. So now, the teachers, they go for 1 week in class, they say the teacher is going to get his salary. So he goes for 1 week, he gets his salary. When he doesn't have money, he comes back to the school. He stays maybe 2 weeks, then he goes again to get his salary. So with that, even the sense of responsibility to say, what are these children doing? It's not there. But if it is your own, a teacher who is developed from the village, those things can be eliminated. The sense of responsibility can come in. Yeah. And then the community, if he did that, the community would be on him to say, hey, we chose you to teach our children. Then what is this? So they can even help the teacher. They can accompany the teacher rather than someone from far.
Yes. I remember that because Central African Republic is a place where there's a lot of challenge and the crisis is. So in one of the locality, the rebels comes and all of the civil servants coming from government, they leave the village. And they say, okay, we are from this village. So we ask the community school to continue to teach the children. Because they are part of the community.
Yes.
The rebels.
The rebels, they are part of the community. So they say, community school, no, there's no problem. The government, the public school, okay, they close. But community school, we know the program, we know the teacher is coming from our community, so they can continue to teach. to teach. And the government, there's something. They ask us why our public schools closed and your school continue to function.
Yeah.
We explain to them the reason. They say, maybe we should now see how to adapt the way we are sending the teacher across the country. In one of the locality, the chief rebels comes, and he wanted to have a meeting with the community to explain that now I am the new ruler of this. And he called for the meeting, nobody showed up. He asked him, why they don't come for the meeting? They don't like me. If not, I'm going to kill everybody. Second day, he asked for the meeting, nobody showed up. And the traditional leader come to him, say, if you want the people to come, invite them to meet at the community school. He said, we'll be there. He said, okay, let's go. And he says the meeting to happen to the community school place. And the village was there.
Wow.
So just to see the power of this, because they know that this community school is for us.
The village.
Maybe the social space.
Yeah. Just to share another story, in a village setting in Zambia, there's a community that has several educational programs. So they have a training institute that assists them to develop certain moral capabilities. They have public schools that they're going to. But then as they thinking about their educational path, you said earlier that this idea that, they go away at some point and by the time they come back, everything they learned is lost. So in that path, they identified this need for a secondary school because in their village setting, they don't have a secondary school. So what happens is these kids that have gone through the whole program end up leaving their village to go to a nearby town, and of course the social forces that exist can also have their impact. And so this community is rising up and saying, parents are speaking amongst themselves, the children themselves are saying we don't want to leave and so on. And so they've addressed this question of the need for a high school. But what's really interesting is that in all this, the mothers have also gathered together and said, well, if we want to help our children in their schooling, shouldn't we have a reasonable academic background? So it's not just the children, it also begins to influence at that level.
Yes.
And of course, if the mothers arise and if their education is the mother being the first educator of the children.
Among the educational efforts discussed by the counselors are programs for academic education called community schools. These schools, which are initiated by Baha'i communities and often supported by Baha'i-inspired organizations, nurture a thirst for academic excellence in students and orient them towards service to their fellow citizens. In recent decades, networks of community schools have emerged in different countries, particularly in rural areas, and places where educational opportunities for young people have historically been limited.
So the community school, it brings a lot of unity in the community. Because when you are starting, it has to come from the desire of the community itself, the chief, the parents, really being involved in the community school. They even decide who is going to be the teacher. They identify who is going to be the teacher. So then, if they identify, other organizations like Bambino Foundation can actually train those teachers to become the teachers that we want, that are going to mine the gems in the children, So once the teacher is identified by the village themselves, they become responsible for that teacher. They decide how much school fees they should maybe give to the teacher for the upkeep. So in so doing, and the community can also decide this one is an orphan, doesn't have to pay, so that
real sense of ownership
really it manifests itself. And they can sometimes even give the money for the teacher to go for the orientation.
So in Zambia, what we have is in an effort to try and combine academic education, moral and spiritual education, and we have this program that's emerged, which is the development of teachers for community schools.
Oh, okay.
And we, just to give you an example, so we have about 50 or 60 of these schools around the country, but recently, one of these schools that started earlier on now has a group of youngsters who've gone through from childhood through their adolescent years, and now they're emerging as graduates, basically, at grade 12. And they've done reasonably well academically, but they also have this sense of responsibility to their community and so on. So there's a group of 8 of them, and these 8 that are graduating out of the community school, of course, they're connected to the youth in their community. And through them, there's like a group of, say, 100 youth that are engaged one way or another in the community. So then I was just chatting with them, trying to find out, so what you know, how have you expressed your sense of social awareness and so on. And initially, when they were younger, they were doing very simple acts, you know, like, for example, cooking for somebody who's sick, or helping an elderly lady, or things like that. But then now, the way they're talking, they're expressing their desire to contribute towards the environment, to improve the health of their communities and so on. And so my next question was, well, what do you want to do once you graduate, you know, because you've finished high school, you'll do your service, what comes after that? And their immediate response was, the 8 of us have talked, and we've identified the issues in our community, and we would like to address those issues.
Really?
So
Very good.
So they had identified health, environment, and education. And based on their interests, they've decided to study these programs. But in addition, they've said, we want to find a school that does distance education, because we don't want to leave the village. We want to apply. It's incredible. So they want to apply their learning as they grow. And they've already started with like a nursery for little seedlings to start planting, because there's deforestation and so on. So, I mean, there's an example in a small setting of people who are really, you know, 17, 18-year-olds who are really taking action, and it's attracting the interest of their parents. It's making them see the value of education as opposed to just academic.
What Ahmed is saying is very important. One example in Central African Republic is that because we started community school in 2004. In
2004.
And some of the children already, they reach university now. But what we see is that they come back to do what? Just to help the children to really acquire the good knowledge about mathematics, about biology, and so on. They come back, they spend 1 week, and they go. They come back again 1 week. So this is kind of support they are giving to their village, to their neighborhood, and the parents start to see the difference.
It's a common feature of all of Baha'i educational efforts, is this fundamental concept of building capacity within the population by those who do have something, being able to share that with others.
That's right.
Yes.
So this idea of when you walk on a path, you're walking with others and you're assisting one another. And that exchange is what builds a lot of capacity. So it's interesting, hearing these different experiences.
Yes.
I can give an example of a certain neighborhood, for example, or a group of villages where we can see some changes, small changes, where children would not really be interested in school. Girls would get married at 12 years, 13 years, because of some of the cultural practices. But with this education, where some of them have gone through the children class, that thirst for knowledge is coming through. This community now has got a lot of youth who are actually involved in this education system, that there's so many children classes just because of the youth who are rising to help those who are younger than themselves. And one thing we also noticed, and actually when we were at a space with this community, where there were about 10 chiefs and religious leaders and community-based organization. We were just stalking, and then one chief says, you know, these children, you see, these young women, there was like a group of maybe 10 or so. He says, these ones, if it was not for this junior youth program, by now they would have been married or having babies out of wedlock, you know. So they can actually see that change. And then he will continue to say, you know, we have even one which is an experience they've never seen before. There are 2 young girls who now have enrolled in the university.
You see? Yeah, exactly. Actually,
So
in
they
Zambia,
were
it's the
really,
same,
so they were really impressed and really recommended the program. And then there's one community where the main concern is really the girl, because the boys, they can try and finish high school, but for the girls, very few would finish high school. Very, very few, and maybe not.
Yes.
You know. So in this place, the teachers really started a conversation to say, what are we going to do about these girls? Just because at 12, 13, they are told that now they are mature, they should look for a man to marry.
Yes.
And if they don't marry, the cultural pressure is on them, forcing them that, oh, maybe they've done something wrong, that's why they can't get married, you see.
Actually, this reminds me of an area in New Zealand where there's been efforts to have educational activities for many years now. And what they're seeing is that some of the youth, as they go through high school, there's a lot of demands from society that they should drop out. Right? There's a lot of pressure to get a job, support their families. But with keeping this conversation from the youth, from that earlier time period, about the value of education. What is the purpose of education? How do we develop our lives, both aspects of spiritual and material? There seems to be a greater coherence building up in the minds of these, and they see it reflected in what their mentors are doing as well. You know, the power of example of some of their mentors, showing that they're qualified individuals, but they always give time for supporting their community. They don't fragment, you know, that this is my work is over here and this is my service. They put service at the center.
That's right.
And then all these different aspects become more in balance. So they have that example, but they also have a chance to talk this through. Because if you don't express these things, which is what the Junior Youth Program is helping a young person to do, if you can't articulate these thoughts, then it's difficult to change these patterns, because these patterns are very strong.
Absolutely.
And having a few others with you makes it more possible. So we're seeing, I guess, in a different reality. This is a urban environment, you know, in a, I guess, the Western setting. That ability to now shape a different pattern, one that's more coherent.
And maybe that comes from this, you know, like a really deep sense of purpose, that you don't see stages in life and one ends, one starts, but you know, you see like service as a lens through which you perceive everything in life, and in that context, then you know, education is also not static. So it's not like you study, then you stop, then you start working. It's actually you study, you work, you have a family, you serve, and everything is done with this broader perspective of the sense of purpose, that I want to transform society, I want to transform myself. And in that engagement, I guess that's what a coherent life really is. Yeah.
You're listening to the Bahá'í World News Service, reporting on major developments and endeavors of the global Bahá'í community. For more information, visit news.baha'i.org.